Hi, folks. Welcome to our debut episode of the Fisher Family Bands podcast. I'm Crystal.
And I'm Jasmine.
And together we make up the Fisher Family Bands. So thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoy these kooky conversations wherever they take us and help us explore how music has impacted society, us individually, and how we carry it in our everyday lives. I know your start with music, but...
She was there.
I was, and it was adorable. But I think that to frame for our audience sake, right? Did you actually
Did I actually show it? That's my start with music. If you are just listening, I showed up a picture of me at what? 3?
You had to be
4?
No, honey, that's what 1.5 looks like.
What?
I think you were still being determined in months, so we'll say 18 months old. At
wow.
Best.
Okay.
15 probably.
But I was sitting on Taj Mahal's lap with a guitar.
So.
Nope.
That's
Other
Jasmine. Way. That's Taj Mahal. And. Okay, we'll get into that because there's a lot to unpack about why my baby's sitting on a celebrity's lap. But the early days of music and influence, what do you remember being the first things musical for you?
Okay, well, car rides. We would go on a lot of road trips to see family or camping or music festivals.
You were born in Langhorne, Pennsylvania, but I had relocated to North Carolina, back to my home and comfort zone when you were just 3 months old.
Yeah.
And so the road trips for a single mom, folks, it involves 8 hours of playing that music as loud as you can and singing to the radio to stay awake while you caffeinate and your baby sleeps in the back. That's driving. That was road travel in the early days.
Yeah. And so my first few memories of music was honestly the Dixie Chicks. Specifically their album Fly.
I feel like that's the first that you could sing along to,
definitely.
That you were cognizant of.
And
I don't want people thinking that at 3 months old I was pumping Dixie Chicks in and you weren't getting any Polly Wolly Doodle. It was not the case.
I did request the normal kid songs.
So we found our way to the center, but how did we get there? That's the musical magic that we want to share with folks through this podcast, because we both have scholastic choral training.
Yep.
Now, it didn't expand for me into high school. I tried out the 10th grade teacher and she was kind of meh for me, so I focused my energies on theater and forensics, which is not chopping up dead bodies, people, but it is public speech and debate. And I was not a debater, but I was good at public speech, and they have a lot of great performance categories like dramatic and humorous interpretation, and wonderful things like prose poetry, so that folks like myself can extend their creative arms and get out there and win awards for it, just like the sports kids. So
sometimes more than the sports kids.
Jazz hands.
These are jazz hands.
What about your scholastic training? Tell me how that was for you.
It's funny because we were kind of opposites with our high school, not experience, because we had a lot of the same
Well, just speaking about music and that.
Yeah. But with choir in particular, I met my choir teacher when I was still in middle school, because my middle school did a joint choir performance.
Can I reel you back a little bit to middle school though, because big props to Mr. Rayfield.
He was my theater teacher.
Wasn't he Broadway trained?
He was, I think.
Yeah. and to bring what he brought to your musical like performance level, because was he specifically the drama teacher? He was the drama teacher, but he would put on these amazing musicals. And to the degree that we would have to extend the runs of shows, there'd be cheers out in hallways.
We may or may not have broken a few fire codes.
I don't even care if those firemen saw the show. They'd be like,
it's true.
Open up the roof.
Yeah.
It was really just, it was outstanding what he got out of you guys. And it showed me, it was like, yeah, you don't just like select and choose the best and then, the rest are in the ensemble. He really gave everybody these great opportunities to spread their wings, to get into the, different positions or roles that they wanted to play. And if they didn't feel confident playing that, he was just as supportive to those little, one-liners or ensemble cast members, and they shine just as brightly.
And I will say, even with the people who did not feel like they could live up to the role that they were given, because there was a role that I was given where I had a full solo that I was like, I don't know if I can sing loud enough. And he sat me down with all the other people I was in the scene with and made me sing in their face as loud as possible.
Nice. I like that.
To each person until I felt comfortable enough about the song. And he was like, all right, now you can do it.
That's a great training mechanism. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I remember in college, some of our training mechanisms for keeping your lines in your head, despite the obstacles of the audience. And so we would partner up and do things like say your multiplication tables for fours, and you'd have to do your multiplications of 4 out loud while the other person shouts numbers at you.
Wow, that's a good one.
I know, isn't that great?
I'm not very good at multiplication, so I think I'd fail.
Well, it'd be like do 2s or 5s, or something that your brain knows well enough, but when you're like supposed to, actors work so hard to remember their lines, and you do your practice and you practice with the people who are memorizing their lines or in the scenes with you. You don't know about what's going to happen when the crying baby throws their bottle and it reverberates in a echo chamber.
Yeah.
And it's during a, really tender love scene or a really dramatic, fight scene.
See, that's a much nicer way than my teacher would do it. He would throw highlighters at you. Dodge the highlighter in the middle of your song. Which, he never tried to hit us. With the highlighter. But, yeah.
But you need to experience the distraction of a highlighter coming at your...
We did not have a, fancy stage. We had a black box theater for
This was Chapel Hill? Or...
No, this was McDougal.
Oh, yeah.
For non-theater people, that is basically not a stage. That is a room. That's a room with a riser.
Let's explain even more clearly. Because lab theater that I mentioned at Graham Memorial was exactly a black box theater. And it was located in the basement of a huge building, and it was rather soundproof. What she's talking about is a classroom in an old Chapel Hill elementary school or middle school that they painted the walls black. So let's not even get it twisted, y'all.
But we had lighting to the gods.
They made do with what they had, and they made it so incredible that it was transformative.
Truly.
I mean, the rendition of A Christmas Carol to date is one of my absolute favorites.
Same.
And y'all made me cry. Shut up.
Yeah.
So, kudos to the early educators and teachers and choral people that had their hands on us, because that's, I think, some of what helped us see the real value of performing in general, music in particular. And, you know, I think I was in chorus starting in the 3rd grade. And I don't know what y'all's process was, but the band teacher would come into the classroom, and we're all sitting at our desks, and he would go through a series of like, all right, everybody clap one beat. And you do your thing. Obviously, I did not do the clapping on the beat because the band teacher never invited me to join them. But for chorus, I had the chops. And we did whatever, singing test to make the music teacher satisfied. And I remember being selected to join the 3rd grade chorus. And then come middle school, it was like you had to try out for like, I think junior high, which you guys call middle school. Junior high, 1 year you could take music appreciation, but then you had to try out for chorus because our chorus teacher, who I don't know if this woman is still out there, her name when we first had her class was Miss McNeil, and then she got married and became Mrs. Creth, but she changed my life. She took music so seriously. She was cool. She was hip. I think she took smoke breaks, and you'd see her out there. So you knew it's like, oh, she's not like stuck up, and she's not like whatever, but she taught us to read music, which I think Mr. Neighbors also stood out for that.
Definitely.
She selected songs well beyond the typical pop radio stuff. We did Broadway things that were, outstanding efforts. And we put on reviews. We put on shows for the whole school that would have costumes and dance choreography and, nothing major, but it was a whole show. And it really drew us to appreciate that to the degree that I remember so distinctly we all selected the best singer in our chorus group. And we were like, we want you to sing this song at the last concert for Mrs. Creth or Miss McNeil, whichever time it was in the timeline. And we all pitched in and got her flowers, and she'd get up from the piano thinking the show's over, and then Tara would step up, and she was the one who was like, she was a church singing, trained, and she would hit these notes that I get the chills right now. And I think the first song we had her do was "You're Once, Twice, 3 times a lady," and then the second one was "Wind Beneath My Wings," and that was the graduation one. And got her every time. So
I love that.
Yeah. So I feel like watching that transition, because you're a middle school guy.
He was decent.
He was decent.
He picked some good musical theater stuff, and I loved that.
Okay.
Yep.
And you got to go perform Star Spangled Banner at the Bulls, Durham Bulls game.
Yes.
And we
learned Beatles.
Okay.
We learned. We had a whole Disney music section. I'm giving this guy a hard time in memory, I think, because it was the concert that you guys did with the different incoming high school classes. So it was the last year of their middle school or last concert of their middle school year, and they were doing this combo concert because it would be the incoming groups from these different schools that would be at the same high school under Mr. Neighbors. And so I don't know if that was his genius brainchild, if it was something they did every year. It was something they did every year.
Really brilliant. But to watch the different groups come from the different middle schools, it wasn't even the high school levels. it was just seeing how little care that your guy took with giving you guys some image. It was like, you guys, okay, we're gonna sing the song now. Come on, let's get it. Okay, and you sang it, and it was wonderful. And but the other groups came up, and it was sharp and so like.
What's funny about that is that later years, where I was in high school, being one of the high school people who Mr. Neighbors had like we were choir. When the high school kids came up, I was even more blown away. Mr. Neighbors takes his craft so seriously. He is still a teacher, and I'm so thankful for that.
We love you, Jeremy Neighbors.
That man changed my life.
Bingo.
Does to this day.
Still engaged.
Yeah, yeah. Literally
in her life, not to other people, but he's married now.
Oh, yeah, he is. We love his wife. But like, I'm literally getting like red-faced about it because he takes his craft so seriously that he was like, I will not have you like disappointing me. And
it would be a disrespect to his reputation.
That's what it would be. It would be disrespect. Yes. Not even his reputation. He could give it less of a shit about his reputation. It's the music.
Well, facts.
He does not want us to disrespect this music because he handpicks all of his music for his different choirs in such a like mindful way and thinking of how the voices will meld together and what each class can take from it.
Yep.
So, like, when we would walk out on that stage, we were fully serious. We were focused. And if you were ever in a Mr. Neighbors class, you know that was always written on the top of his board at every concert.
Focus.
Focus, focus, focus. That is the 3 Fs.
Focus,
focus, focus, focus. Because that is the only thing you can do. Like, whatever happens on stage happens on stage.
Yeah.
But if you are focused, it'll at least be fine.
And you'll know where you're at and where to pick up and how to keep going.
Yeah.
I mean, the beauty is, and I sat through every wonderful performance. Pull your some of those. The beauty of that is, nobody knows except for those kids in the chorus and the teacher what the performance is supposed to come off like. And so
also majority of them are in different languages.
And you know, who's gonna know? Yeah, I think the first song that you guys learned was Brazilian or something. I mean, because he had gone to Brazil and learned all these great songs.
I think
so. The culture that he brought to the table alone was so incredible.
But what I was saying about the like middle schools is it ended up switching because I was in choir every year of high school. Started off in the base level where you don't have to audition, and then immediately was like, I want to audition for the women's choir. And then later, I think my last 2 years, I was in his cabaret class, which is the musical theater class. So, with the women's choir, we would join the all the choirs in singing with the middle schoolers. And these middle schoolers, like, it ended up being that McDougal was the well-behaved. And that teacher was able to, like, maybe it was just my class that was, like, not...
That's funny.
He wasn't able to handle us. Or that the other classes got worse because they did switch the teachers. And it ended up being like, wow, you can tell these kids are literally just like trying to get an easy A. Wow. Like, what the fuck? Yeah. We take ourselves so seriously. Yeah. And Mr. Neighbors always said at the beginning of the year, this is not a cake class. This is not an easy A. You're going to learn how to sight read. You're going to learn different languages.
Singing intermission. 8. The Climb by Miley Cyrus.
I can almost see it, that dream I'm dreaming, but there's a voice inside my head saying, you'll never reach it.
Every step I'm taking, every move I make feels lost with no direction. My faith is shaken, but I gotta keep trying, gotta keep my head held high. There's always gonna be another mountain.
I'm always gonna wanna make it move.
Always gonna be an uphill battle.
Sometimes I'm gonna have to lose.
Ain't about how fast I get there. Ain't about what's waiting on the other side. It's the climb.
The struggles I'm facing,
The chances I'm taking.
sometimes might knock me down, but
No, I'm not breaking.
I may not know it, but these are the moments that I'm gonna remember most, yeah. Just gotta keep going, and
I gotta be strong.
just keep pushing on.
'Cause there's always gonna be another mountain.
I'm always gonna wanna make it move.
Always gonna be an uphill battle. Sometimes I'm gonna have to lose. Ain't about how fast I get there.
Ain't about what's waiting on the other side. It's the climb. Yeah. There's always gonna be another mountain.
I'm always gonna wanna make it move.
Always gonna be an uphill battle.
Sometimes you're gonna have to lose. Ain't about how fast I get there.
Ain't about what's waiting on the other side.
It's the climb. Yeah. Keep on moving. Keep climbing.
Keep the faith, baby.
It's all about the climb.
Keep your faith, keep your faith. Whoa.
And, you know, from the early days of my own childhood, I think back and I know that it was about my own parents' influences, going to whatever shows they took me to or listening to whatever records were in the record. Let me explain records for people who may not know.
Those are
big,
popular
giant...
again. Don't even cap.
But we had the turntable, and you slide open the top, and one side of that held all the equipment you needed to play the music, but the other side held all the albums. And so I would just sit and look at this collection that my parents had accrued, which was mostly inappropriate stuff for someone my age. Ohio Players with like honey dripping down half naked women's bodies and cherries on luscious lips that I'm like, I don't know what any of this means, so let me look at the lyrics and maybe I'll understand better.
That is horrifying.
It was a little like, well, you know, a lot of childproofing in the house that didn't involve censorship, I guess. And there would be comedy albums, Richard Pryor, Bill Cosby, Moms Mabley, you know, and a lot of Black influence, Al Green, Tina and Ike, things that definitely were enriching for the musical base that is in my soul and shakes my butt. But also, I had my brother Gary, and that'll be an episode that we will spend some time on, talking about the musical influence of my brother and her uncle, who I wish she had an opportunity to meet. But he was 11 years old by the time I was born. So he was already starting to develop his musical interests and figure out where he was going to align as far as that goes. And it couldn't have been more opposite from my parents' collection. So I got The Police, Peter Gabriel, all these, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, all these really weird and out there and crazy and cool, things that were current and contemporary for the 70s, but also things that were just out there and different for him. Thanks so much for joining us on Fisher Family Band's podcast. We'll have new episodes for you every 2 weeks, and until then, stay in the groove.